Alright, hi everybody. We're going to get into our second chapter, and in this chapter we actually get to cover a lot more financial material than we did in the first chapter. The first chapter was predominantly a lot of statistics and not a whole lot of personal finance to it. This chapter kind of flips. There's a lot more financial information and not quite as heavy on the math. Alright, so let's start the warm-up here. It does say... given these points, 1, 2, 3, 10, 4, 17, 5, 26, and 6, 37. So we've got 5 points there. And the first problem wants us to write a function, y equals f of x, for the set of ordered pairs. All right, so when you have pairs of points, ordered pairs like this, one thing that oftentimes can be helpful is if you put them in a table of values, a t-table. All right, so let's take that first point, 1, 2. Let's take the second one, 3, 10, 4, 17, 5, 26, and 6, 37. So there's our 5 points. What you want to do is try and look to see if there's some kind of pattern going on. So one of the things to recognize is that the x column actually skips a number, right? There's no 2 in between the 1 and the 3. Other than that, we're going up by 1s. All right, so kind of look at what's going on. If you look at from 3 to 4, from 4 to 5, from 5 to 6, you're going up by 1. All right. Now look to see if there's a pattern that you can figure out on in the y column. All right. So going from 10 to 17. All right, so it might look at first like you're supposed to be adding 7, but does that pattern continue? Right? When you go from 17 to 26, are we still adding 7? No. All right, so that's not it. All right, also then maybe look to see, well, are we multiplying by any kind of number? It doesn't look like there's any kind of number that I can multiply 10 by to get 17. To multiply 10 by a number to get 17, you would have to multiply by 17/10. All right, if I multiply 17, so for instance, when I go from 10 to 17, right here, so 10 times 17/10 will get you 17. But let's see if that pattern continues. If I take 17 and multiply by 17/10 again, I get 34/10. All right, which is, about 3.4. I definitely don't get 26, right? So that's not the pattern. So we thought maybe the pattern might be multiplying, but that's not what's going on. I'm not multiplying by the same number each time. All right, so if I'm not adding the same number each time, if I'm not multiplying by the same number each time, I'm starting to eliminate some possibilities here, right? Now look at it. Does it look like I'm subtracting the same number every time? Well, it looks like those numbers are getting bigger, so I'm probably not subtracting the same number every time. How about dividing, right? If I divide these by a number, am I going to get the next one? That's not looking like it's the case either, right? These numbers are getting bigger. All right, so when you look at your operations that may potentially be going on here, if adding, you're not adding the same number every time, you're not subtracting the same number every time, you're not multiplying by the same number every time, you're not dividing by the same number every time. All right, those 4 operations aren't what's going on, or at least it doesn't appear that that's what's happening here. So think about what other operations could potentially be going on, right? So, for instance, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing are your main operations, but we do have some other operations, right? Like exponents. All right, so let's look at, maybe that's what's going on here. So let's take our first x value, 1, and do an exponent. Let's try squaring it. If I do 1 squared, I get 1. All right, if I take the next x value, 3, and I square that, I get 9. If I take the next x value, 4, and square it, I get 16. All right. Now, when I squared 1, I got 1, not 2. All right, I wanted 1, but I got 2. When I took 3 and squared it, I got 9. I wanted 9, but I got 10. When I took 4 and squared it, I wanted 16. I got 16, but I wanted 17. All right. So what looks like is going on here is I seem to be taking my x values, squaring them, and then adding 1. For instance, if I take 1 squared, I get 1. Now if I add 1, I get that 2 I was looking for. If I do 3 squared, I get 9. If I add 1 to it, I get the 10 I was looking for. And if I take 4n squared, I get 16. If I add 1, I get the 17 I was looking for. Let's keep going, see if this works. If I take the 5n squared, I get 25. Now if I add 1, whoa, look at that. There's the 26 I was looking for. All right, take a look at the next one. 6. If I square it, I get 36. If I add 1, I get the 37 that I was looking for. All right, so the pattern seems to be I take my x, whatever it is, and I square it, and then add 1. All right, so that actually is our function. Our function here is going to be to take our y value. To get the y value, we take the x value and square it, and then add 1 to it. All right, so that's our function. All right, if I do that every time, I get, with every x on the left, I get every y on the right. All right, so that is the pattern I was looking for. So sometimes coming up with a function, really what you're doing is just coming up with a pattern. All right. Now, question number 2 says use that function to determine the value of y when x is 11. So all we're going to do is take this x value of 11 and just plug it in right here. So I get y equals 11 squared plus 1. Well, that's 121 plus 1. That gives me 122. And that's how you do the warm-up. All right, moving on to some vocabulary. All right, so in a lot of these kind of future chapters, a lot of these future sections, the vocabulary becomes pretty important. All right, so kind of the more we get into financial information, the more important those vocabulary items become. All right, so let's start with the first one. We are talking here in section 2.1 about checking accounts. So let's start with that. What is a checking account? All right, many of you probably have a checking account. If you have a debit card, more than likely you have it connected to a checking account. All right, so all it is an account at a bank that allows its owner to deposit money, make withdrawals, make transfers of funds, write checks. Now, traditionally over the years, checking accounts were used so that you would have it. So you could have an account where you wrote checks out of. All right, fewer and fewer people write checks these days. Most younger people, such as yourself, may have never even written a check before. Right? Most people today, rather than writing checks out of their checking account, instead they just swipe their debit card. You know, it's very similar. Basically, a check is just a paper version of swiping your debit card. Right? It takes a little bit longer. It's not quite as convenient, and that's why most people choose not to write checks anymore and instead just use their debit card. All right, but it kind of is used the same way in a very similar type of fashion. All right. Now, checking accounts can come as a single account, which is where just maybe you alone are the only person with access to that account. And when I say access, I mean you're the only one allowed to make withdrawals. When you have a checking account, anybody can make a deposit into your check because the bank figures, hey, if somebody's going to put money in your account, you're not going to argue with that. You're going to be happy about it. So it doesn't mean it limits who can deposit into your account. It means that a checking account limits, a single checking account limits who actually can withdraw out of that account. All right, so a single account means only one single person is allowed to make withdrawals, all right, which is taking money out of that account. All right, the next type is a joint account. Joint account's the opposite. Here's where more than one person is allowed to make withdrawals. So an example of this is my wife and I. We have a joint checking account. Right? She can withdraw money out of the account. I can withdraw money out of the account. We both are able to go down to the bank, make a withdrawal, go to ATM, make a withdrawal, go to any store, swipe our debit card, make a purchase on our debit card. We both have full, complete access to that checking account, and that's what's known as a joint account. All right. Many of you, probably your first account you had might have been a joint account with, say, your parents, right, where they were allowed to make withdrawals and deposits, and you were as well. All right, so a lot of this chapter, you're going to see this next word a lot, balance. All right, so the tricky thing about a balance is the balance is how much is in an account, but not previously and not in the future. All right, the balance is how much is in that account at the time you're looking at it. So if I said, what's your balance in your checking account today, you would be looking at how much is in your checking account today. If I asked, what was your balance in your account, in your checking account, 2 weeks ago, you would tell me exactly how much was in that account 2 weeks ago. If I say, hey, if you keep you keep depositing $100 a week for the next 6 months, right, what will be your balance 6 months from now? You would be looking at not how much is in it now, you'd be looking at how much is in that account 6 months from now after you deposit $100 a week for 6 months, right? So the balance always has kind of a specific date tied to it. So it can be the current balance, what's in it now. It can be a past balance, what was previously in it, or it can be a future balance. All right. Now, some things about checking accounts. There are lots of different variations of these things. So some checking accounts are free. So for instance, I have a checking account at my credit union and it's free. I don't have to pay an annual fee for it. I don't have to pay fees when I write checks or anything. It's completely free to me. I have to maintain some minimum balance in there, which means I have to always have at least, I forget what the amount is. It's pretty low, usually like, I don't know, $25 or something. I have to have some kind of money in there at all times, but that account is free for me to use. It's free for me to maintain. I don't have to pay an annual fee or anything like that. All right. Some checking accounts do make you pay annual fees or make you pay per check fees, right? Like each check you write or each purchase you make, you have to pay fees out of these. So when you are opening up a checking account, always a good idea to look to see what are the fees involved in that checking account, because the way I see it, I work really hard for my money and I don't like somebody else taking my money away from me. I like to be able to decide when I want to spend my money or not. So if I were looking for a checking account, I would always look for a free one. I would never go get a checking account where there's a fee attached to it. All right. Now, some checking accounts are interest-bearing, meaning if you have money in that account, the bank is going to use your money and maybe loan it out to other people, and you get some of that money back extra. It's called interest, and we're going to be looking at interest a lot in this chapter. So not so much in this section, but really starting next section, we really dive really deep into what interest is, how it operates, how it's calculated, that kind of thing. But some checking accounts, not very many, but some are interest bearing. So for instance, I told you I have a checking account at my credit union. My credit union, they pay me interest on the money that I have in it. So they keep my money, they hold on to it, and I can, withdraw it anytime I want. But every dollar that I have in that checking account, the bank is going to pay me interest back. So it's a percentage of each dollar that they pay back to me. And it's usually an annual percentage rate. So it's usually a percentage that you get back at the end of the year. All right. And so, yes, not very many checking accounts are interest bearing. So that's another one of these things that you want to look at when you're looking at opening up bank accounts. You want to know, hey, am I going to earn interest on that money? All right. The way I figure is if I got to keep my money in a bank account somewhere, put it in some bank, I'd much prefer to put it in a bank that's going to pay me back interest rather than put it in a bank where they're not going to pay me any interest, right? It's usually not a ton of interest, but, every little bit helps as far as I'm concerned. All right. Now, another type of checking account that's kind of come out recently is one where you can really only access the funds electronically. All right, so that's the only way you're allowed to freely access your accounts for free. So what I mean by that is you can't go down into the bank and make a withdrawal or a deposit with a bank teller. You have to only do it electronically. So you either go to the ATM or you do transfers online, like an online banking account. So these kind of accounts are only free if you do all your banking online or at the ATM. All right. So any those kind of accounts, if you did go into the bank to talk to a teller and, do whatever transaction you wanted to do at the bank, if you did it inside the bank, live face-to-face with a teller, you would get charged for that. All right. And, the big reason for that is banks, are always trying to cut their costs, right? They want to be more profitable. And, it costs them a lot of money to build the bank and to hire tellers and all that. It's much cheaper for the bank to just do it all online. So they would much prefer you to do all your banking online. And so they offer free accounts to people who do all their banking online. Right? And then they, charge you some kind of fee if you actually do need to go in person inside the bank. All right, so here's a big thing that many people get themselves into trouble when they have their first checking account because they don't fill one of these out. So this is a check register, and all this is a record of all the deposits and withdrawals that you make in your checking account. All right, so withdrawals are, you can see the little minus sign here, right? Withdrawals are when you're removing money from your checking account, so you're taking money out. That's why it's subtracting. It's negative. All right. Deposits are when you're putting money into your account. All right, and that's why it's a positive, right? It's going to add to the amount of money that's in the account. All right. So a lot of people used to, kind of back in the day, be very religious about filling these check registers out. They wanted to know exactly how much money was in their account at all times. And really, it used to be, before the advent of online banking, that this was really the only way you knew how much money you had in your account. Otherwise, you had to wait a whole month for your next bank statement to come in the mail, right? But now with online banking, right, you can log on to your bank and put in your password and immediately know exactly how much money you have in your account at all times. A lot of people have gotten lazy about filling these check registers out. I would not suggest that for you. I would definitely suggest that not only do you fill out a check register, but you make sure that you are filling it out every time, that you are checking it for errors, all right, because it's your money and you want to, I would presume, know exactly how much money you have at any one time. You'd want to know how much money you're spending. Sometimes when you write checks, they don't get cashed right away. And so it can make you think you have more money than you really do. There's a lot of reasons why you want to fill one of these out. But the biggest reason is you want to have an accurate accounting of where your money is at all times. Really bad idea to have a checking account and not keep a record of what you're spending, how much money you have in the account, so on and so forth. All right. So what you do is this first column right here is where you put it. See how it says number or code? All right, so if you wrote a check, each check has its own individualized kind of unique number. So you know, hey, this is the check that I wrote to, maybe the car dealership, and this is the check that I wrote to the IRS to pay my taxes or whatever, right? So each check has its own unique number, and this is predominantly what used to go in that column, was the check numbers. But like I said, more and more nowadays, people aren't writing checks, so instead they're, using their debit card at the bank. So maybe this one right here says DC. That's probably debit card, right? So that, looks like somebody went to McDonald's and swiped their debit card, right? So maybe you come up with your own little code. So like DC is for debit card. And then the next one, you go to the ATM and you withdraw some cash. So you put in a code ATM, right? Maybe right here, you have a phone bill to Verizon. So maybe that's an automatic payment, right? Where you give Verizon your routing number into your checking account, and then they just automatically take the money out of your checking account each month when you need to pay your bill, right? So maybe that's AP is automatic payment. Maybe AD is like automatic deposit. Right, so maybe you work for a company and you're getting paid, right? For instance, when I get my paycheck, I don't get a copy of my paycheck and then drive down to the ATM or go into the bank and deposit it. I have my paycheck direct deposited. All right, now when I'm doing these, I don't use AD, I use DD for direct deposit, but it's all kind of what code you want to use. All right, but anyway, the point is that that money is being automatically deposited into the account. All right, and maybe FT is like a funds transfer, right? Like you're transferring funds from your checking, in this case, to savings. All right, so you can have different kinds of accounts. We're going to talk about savings accounts next time we meet. All right. So anyway, these codes and numbers are just more for your tracking than anything. All right. These dates, and this is something to be careful of. The date that you put into your check register is the date that you actually spent the money, you withdrew the money, or that you deposited the money. All right. Now, sometimes you might say, for instance, go to In-N-Out and swipe your card, right? And you might do that today. Well, In-N-Out might not report that to your bank for a day or two. All right, so the dates don't always match up, so that is something we got to be careful of, and we will talk about that a little bit later. But nonetheless, these dates are always the dates that you either write the check, or you swipe the card, or you go to the ATM and withdraw the cash, or go to the ATM and deposit the cash, or whatever. Right? Now, this third column is where you put a description of the transaction. Like, what did you do? All right. Now, a lot of times what you might want to do is, have a little shorthand method. Like, chances are you're not paying rent to, multiple different places. So maybe you would just write rent instead of Brightview Apartments rent, right? Like, obviously, if you're paying rent, it's at the apartments you live in, right? So, this usually takes up some of the most amount of time, so I don't typically tend to write long descriptions in there. I tend to, kind of do it in a shorthand way and write quick little notes rather than a whole, wordy description. All right, so if you are subtracting money out of the account, you're taking money out of the account, like withdrawing, or you're spending money at a store or something, that's considered a withdrawal. And so all withdrawals go in this column. So anytime you are taking money out of the account, subtracting money away from the current balance, it's considered a withdrawal. All right, so that's not necessarily just withdrawing money at the ATM, right? This could be writing a check to pay a bill. It could be, a payment automatically being taken out of your account. Right? It could be you swiping the card at a store, whatever. Anytime money's being removed from your account, it's considered a withdrawal, and it goes in that column. All right, this next column over is for deposits. And deposits are it's the opposite, when you're adding money into your account. And usually, pretty much the only time that happens is if you actively are putting money into your account or somebody's doing it for you, right? And usually this is like a paycheck, right? Not always, but usually this is like a paycheck that you put in there. And what you'll find oftentimes, sadly enough, is that you don't have nearly as many deposits. See, there's only one, and you have a lot more withdrawals. All right, and that's pretty common for most people, right? Because you usually only get paid maybe once every 2 weeks or something, but you usually spend money more than once every 2 weeks. So there's usually more withdrawals than there are deposits. All right. Now, hopefully, the amount of money that goes in this column is higher than the amount of money that goes in this column. That's kind of the goal, but there will be usually fewer deposits number-wise than withdrawals. All right. Now, this is the balance. All right. The balance is how much is in your account at any one time. So you have this number. If you look, 973.82 right there, that is the beginning balance. So that's what the balance was at the beginning of this check register. Now, sometimes that might be like it is here at the beginning of a month. So some people like to have, their own check register for one entire month. So they start at the first of the month and then go to the end of the month. All right. Some people, just kind of keep one long check register where one just goes into the next. So as soon as you run out of space on one check register, you get a new one and just continue on. Some people like to do it in a way that kind of coincides with their banking statements. That's the way that I like to do it. So for instance, if I were to get my bank statement on the 10th of each month, I would start a new check register on like the 11th, right? So that my check register kind of goes along time-wise with my bank statements. All right, and you'll see why I choose to do that at a future section when we start talking about reconciling our bank statements. All right. Now, one thing to look for, you'll notice this one column right here that I did not talk about. All right, that's something we're going to talk about in a later section. Basically, that's when a check quote-unquote clears. In other words, I said earlier how the bank doesn't always know right away. Like I might go down to Best Buy and swipe my card. Best Buy might not tell my bank until tomorrow. So I would leave this blank until the bank notifies me that, hey, we saw that you spent $50 down at Best Buy. And as soon as the bank lets me know that they know about that transaction, and that they have either withdrawn the money or deposited the money, then I put like a little check mark in there, and that check mark just kind of lets you know that the bank knows about that withdrawal or that deposit, and because they know about it, they have appropriately withdrawn the money or deposited the money. All right, so if you've made say you wrote a check and the bank doesn't know about it yet, you would leave this blank, right? And the reason why is because you want to account in your records that you have spent that money, even if the bank doesn't know about it yet. Because eventually the bank will find out, and if you're not accounting for it here in your balance, it's going to look to you like you have a lot more money in your account than you really do. That leads to a lot of problems, in particular overdrawing your account and getting hit with fees. And so that's a problem that you want to try to avoid, and we'll talk some more about that later. Okay, so we've got an example here. It says complete a check register for the following transactions with a starting balance of $672.58. So the first thing at the beginning of each check register like this, always a good idea to start with your starting balance. So I'm going to write in starting balance. Now, I didn't get that from writing a check or depositing any money or anything like that, right? So you can write this here, and then you can do $672.58, right? So you put the dollars in this part, and you put the cents in this part, all right? Now, you can do it that way. However, most of these check registers come with a little place for you to put the beginning amount, the starting balance, without having to actually waste a line. So here I wasted a whole line putting in starting balance. So I don't actually want to do that. So instead, I'm going to do what these things are really kind of made to do, which is instead of putting it there, just put your starting balance right here. So we've got about that. We've got 672.58. All right, now notice up there, there's nowhere to put in a description. So it's kind of understood when you're putting money in that top box that it must have been your starting balance. All right, so we started with that much amount of money. All right, now let's go through. Now notice these red transactions, there's 9 of them. There are 9 of them. They're dated. So I'm going to go in order. I like to, when I'm doing my check register, I like to make sure that they're chronologically ordered. All right, so from the earliest transaction all the way to the latest transaction. So my first one happened on 8/31. Okay, and it's a paycheck. So you could write anything if you wanted to write in the company name of your company or whatever. Like I work for one company, right? So I would just write paycheck personally. Okay. Now you can put in the number, but since it's not my check, it would be the school district writing me a check. I don't really need to keep track of their check numbers. So when I'm writing a check, I would put that check number in there. But since I'm receiving a check, I don't really care about the number. Now, my paycheck is for $468.35. I do not want to put it in the withdrawal column because I am not withdrawing this money. This is money that I am adding into my account. All right, so this is my deposit. My paycheck is getting deposited into my account. So what I would do is I'd put it right in here, $468.35. Okay, now that is a deposit, so that money is getting added into my account. So what I would do is I would take my $672.58, and then I would want to add that $468.35. And when I do that, my new balance is $1,140.93. Okay, so that far right column is always the most current balance. Right, so I did this first transaction. All right, the next transaction is I have my rent due. All right, so that's on 9/1, and it's rent. Notice I don't spend a lot of time writing words into the transaction. I just put something in there that reminds me what it was. And my rent is for $625.00. Okay. So since I have to pay my landlord that money is going to get removed from my account. So I start with my $1140.93 that I already had in my account, and I subtract that $625. All right, and now I have a total of $515.93. Okay. All right, the next transaction, the next day on 9/2, I go to the grocery store, okay, and I buy groceries. All right, so, just put in groceries, right? Or if you wanted to put in Ralph's or Albertsons or something, I suppose you could do that. But I'm paying money for those groceries, right? They're not paying me. So that money is going to get taken out of my account. So that's a minus. That's going to get subtracted. So it is a withdrawal. I have to withdraw money from my account to pay for those groceries. All right. So I'm going to take my $515.93 and I'm going to subtract $147.24. All right, and my new balance is $368.69. All right. Now the next one, I've got a car payment due. All right, and that comes on 9/6. So on the 6th, I've got my car payment. And that amount is $263.21. All right, and I put that in the withdrawal column. Obviously, I have to pay for my car, so that money's coming out of my account. So that's going to get subtracted again. So take this current balance, $368.69, and subtract $263.21. And now, my once promising bank account has a balance of $105.48. I don't have a whole lot of money left in there. All right. Now, unfortunately, a sad thing about life is bills just keep coming. So my next bill is I've got an insurance bill. All right, and that comes on 9/10. All right, so that might be, car insurance. I don't know, it doesn't say right here. So let's just say insurance. And that insurance bill is for $92.46. Once again, this is money I'm going to have to pay to get that insurance. So I subtract $92.46. And when I do, now I only have $13.02. Okay, so now I don't have a whole lot of money left. All right. All right, so now we got to be careful. So we only have $13.02 in our account. Now, I know that that's how much I have in this account because I've been filling out my check register. If I have not been filling out my check register, I might not really know exactly how much money I have in my account. And I might make a mistake like going to the gas station and getting gas, right? So look what happens on 9/11. On 9/11, I go to the gas station and I get gas. And I get gas for $56.68. Okay, well, that's a problem, right? I only have $13 in my account. Right? How am I going to get $56? All right. So sometimes banks catch this right away, and they will just decline your card. Right? If they know that, hey, you only have $13 in your account, you can't go and spend $56. They will just decline it. All right. Now, sometimes the bank might think you have more money in the account than you really do. So, for instance, maybe this insurance payment maybe the bank doesn't know about that insurance payment yet. All right. So maybe they think you have an extra $92.46 than you really have. So sometimes they let you spend the money that you don't have because they don't know yet that you really don't have that money. Okay. So what I mean is this, like at this point, it looks to the bank like I have $105.48. Well, what if I wrote a check that day and sent it in the mail? It might take a couple days to get to my insurance company, and then it might take a couple days for my insurance company to alert my bank. So my bank might think I have a lot more money in my account than I really do. So when I go to the gas station, the bank might not decline my card. They might think, hey, they still got some money in that account. We can let them use this money. All right. So that gas is for $56.68. Well, because I only have $13 left, I'm going now into the negative. I have to take that $13.02 and subtract the $56.68, and I end up with a negative amount. I now have I now have negative $43.66. All right. Now, the bank is not in the business of just giving you free loans. So the bank is not going to let you go into the negative, because now that means you're taking their money. All right? And banks are very serious about their money. They're not going to let you just take it and go, hey, sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I withdrew more than I actually had. Sorry, my bad. I'll get it back to you. The bank's not going to tolerate that nonsense. What the bank is going to do is now going to hit you with an overdraft fee. So look at this. An overdraft fee of $25 is assessed if the account balance goes below zero. All right. So now, because you were into the negative, the bank on that same day, on 9/11, is now going to hit you with an overdraft fee. What that means is you have overdrafted your account. You have spent more money than you actually have in it. All right. And that is a $25 bill. All right, so they hit you with a fee, and the idea there is to make it just painful enough that you stop spending the bank's money and start spending your own money. All right? So now you're even further into the negative. You have negative $68.68. All right, so right now you owe the bank $68.66. All right, now the next day you have even more money coming out of the account. Maybe you wrote a check a couple days ago and you weren't paying attention to how much you had in your account. So on 9/14, you write another check, and you already are in the negative, but now you have a cell phone bill that you pay, and that cell phone bill is $84.73. Well, now we're going even further into the negative. All right, so now I'm going to subtract that $84.73, and now I'm in the hole $153.39. Okay, now notice I just went into the negative even further. A good way to think about it is this: every time you try to spend money that you do not have, the bank's going to hit you with an overdraft fee. All right, so that happened with our gas, right? We went to the gas station and we spent money that we didn't really have, so they hit us with this overdraft fee. All right? Well, now I go down to the cell phone company and I pay a bill, and I pay again with money I don't have. So the bank is going to hit me now with another overdraft fee. All right? So just because you're in the negative, they don't just hit you with one fee. They hit you with fee after fee after fee every single time that you are spending money in the negative region. Anytime you're spending money that you do not have, they're going to hit you with another overdraft fee. So we have another overdraft fee of $25. So now our account has $25 even less. So now we're in the hole $178.39. Okay. Now I've got a dinner date. Right? And, that overdraft fee is going to occur on the same day. Right? The next day on 9/15, go out on a dinner date. All right, and this is a real danger zone now because now I'm spending money again that I do not have, $94.37. I can't spend $94 if I don't have $94, right? So when I do that, the bank says, thank you very much. You're spending money that you don't have. Now you owe us $272.76. We're going to subtract away that $94 from your dinner date. But now, because once again you spent money you didn't have, we're going to hit you with yet another overdraft fee. Of $25. So now you owe the bank a total of $297.76. Okay? And that's actually probably the better thing that can happen. Imagine you go out on a dinner date, you've been wanting to go out with this person for a long time, and you ask them out to dinner, you go out to dinner, and if the bank knows that you're already in the negative, the bank might just decline your card. All right, and think about how embarrassing that would be, right? Like you ask somebody out on a date, take them out to dinner, you eat the meal, the bill comes, and your card is declined, right? And now, all of a sudden, maybe you have to, kind of look foolish and ask the person that you asked on a date and say, hey, turns out I don't have the money, you mind paying for it this time? That's probably a good way to make sure that you don't get a second date with that person, right? So watch out for that. Okay, let's look on this last one, 9/15. All right, on 9/15, we have, whoops. Let's see if I can get that in. It's not letting me to write down there for some reason. Well, unfortunately, this is not letting me write on here. Let's see if I can get out of here. Technical difficulty. Hold on, folks. Alright, so rather than put the date there, let's see if I can write the date in here. So we have 9/15. It's not letting me write on that section for some reason. So now I'm finally getting paid. So now I'm finally going to get out of this negative. All right, and this is a paycheck, and that paycheck is for $468.35 again. Okay, and that I put into the deposit column because it is a deposit. It's adding money into my account. So now I add that $468.35. And I'm finally out of the negative. I finally have a positive amount of money in my account. I'm up at $170.59. All right, so a few things to learn from this. First of all, one of the big things to understand is every single transaction you make where you are spending money that you do not technically have, the bank will hit you with an overdraft fee. They don't just hit you with one, right? They don't say, hey, sorry, you're in the negative. Here's a fee to remind you, and then you keep spending money into the more and more into the negative. They don't go like, oh, well, we already alerted him. We already told him that we charge him an overdraft fee, so we're not going to hit him with any more fees. No, that's not the way it works. They hit you with fee after fee after fee. Every time you spend money that you don't have, they hit you with a fee. All right. So in this problem, those fees were $25, right? And we paid 1, 2, 3 of them. All right, so by being careless with our money and not paying attention to what we have in our account at any one time, we paid an extra $75 in overdraft fees, and this is just in 2 weeks. All right, it is very, very easy to do. It is very, very easy to get yourself into trouble with these overdraft fees by not paying attention to how much you are spending and not paying attention to how much you have in your account, because I will tell you, I don't know very many people who do what I just showed you to do. Most people I know do not keep an accurate track of what's in their checking account. Most people do not do a check register. All right. That's one of the big reasons why so many people in the U.S. have so many financial problems, is because simply they don't account for their money very well. They are sloppy, they're lazy, they don't fill out check registers, so they never really know exactly how much money they have. Or even worse, they don't do it because they say, oh, well, the bank keeps records. Right? The bank has a record. If I really want to know how much money I have in my account, I'll just log on online and check my balance online. Well, first of all, the bank sometimes doesn't know about transactions you've made, and they just haven't been alerted to yet. So you might check your bank account, and they might tell you have a balance of $100. Well, maybe you wrote a check yesterday for $90. And the bank doesn't know about it yet. So they're telling you have $100, but really you wrote a check for $90. So you really only have $10 left in that account, right? So you might be tempted, oh, I got $100 in my account. I'm going to go, buy those concert tickets or something, right? Well, if you actually did have $100, that might not be a problem. But since you really only have 10, that's a big problem, all right? And if you're not keeping your own records, it's very easy to make that mistake. So I would strongly suggest that you always fill out a check register anytime you're using your checking account. That means when you swipe your debit card, when you go to an ATM, when you write a check, right? Anytime any money is automatically withdrawn or automatically deposited from that account, fill it out in your check register. That way you always know exactly what you have. On top of that, and I'll at a later date kind of give you some numbers, banks are notorious for not always having the best records on hand, right? They a lot of times, shall we say, money kind of mysteriously goes missing in their customers' bank accounts. And so if you are relying solely on the bank to tell you how much money you have, that probably is not the best idea, because the bank, whether they're doing it on purpose or not, has many times over the years overcharged billions of dollars from their customers' accounts. If that should probably scare you, and I'll give you some more exact figures on that on another date. All right, but this is how a checking account works. All right, you write a check or you swipe the card, and you're either putting money in, that's called a deposit, adding money to your account, or you're taking money out, buying something, and that's called a withdrawal. All right, and you just want to keep a good record of this.